Today on SDL, we have Ed Sattar, who is the CEO of Quickstart Learning. So that's pretty interesting. I don't think we ever had a C-level person on here before, so that's kind of cool. We're going to talk about training and certification and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So you should definitely check this out. Stick around.
This is a Security Weekly production.
Welcome to Secure Digital Life. If your users are going to keep putting risky stuff on your machine, you're screwed. So Top can help us understand the complexity of blockchain.
I was reading through the show notes, man. Oof.
In binary, it would be 001. Who cares? But it's probably not significant anyway. Like you're looking out through the HAL dot, hey, Dave.
It's like Sims, but with,
It would be like Sims.
Instead of AI, it's only.
Accredited by Microsoft, Cisco, NetApp, IDLE, Oracle, and EC Council, Quickstart delivers high-impact, low-cost IT training through its cognitive learning platform in multiple domains. With Quickstart, you get an ever-growing catalog of courses, self-paced courses offered through a monthly subscription, virtual classrooms offered through an annual subscription, peer-to-peer learning, mentoring, official courses, certified instructors, hands-on labs, and more. For more information, visit www.quickstart.com. Use coupon code PAUL20 to get 20% off on all cybersecurity courses. Quickstart, creating world-class technologists. You and only you should join us for our webcast with Logarithm about tips and tricks for defending the enterprise using open source tools. And that's going to be on September 27th. So you have a little bit of time at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But register now at securityweekly.com/logarithm. Microsoft Ignite conference. So Mark and I are going to be at Microsoft Ignite doing interviews. So if you're going to be in Orlando at Microsoft Ignite, you should definitely drop by and say hi. And if you do want to get interviewed there, you should let us know now so we can schedule that. Today, Ed Sattar joins us from Quickstart Learning, and he's here to talk with us about cybersecurity training and certification. And I guess he's the expert because, he's got a C in his title, so he must be. And, he started the company, so I think he's probably the guy who can actually tell us about that. Hi, Ed.
Hi, how are you, Doug? Glad to be here and glad to contribute.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you were able to join us. And Russ is here from the burgeoning office. So now there's a picture in the background. I can't make out what it is. Is it dogs playing pool? Or
it's Picasso's Guernica.
Oh, it's almost the same thing. Picasso's Guernica, dogs playing pool. Picasso's dogs playing pool in Guernica. It all works. But I can't see it from here, though. It's... Oh, maybe, yeah. I think you've got it upside down. But...
Yeah.
But... So we're going to talk about cybersecurity training and certification stuff today with Ed, because he can probably tell us what we really should be doing. So Ed, what do you? I'm going to start with just asking, what do you think the key challenges in cybersecurity are right now?
Well, there are several challenges within the cybersecurity space, but I'll mention some of the major ones. It's the number one on top of the list is really kind of mitigating advanced threats, insufficient identity, credential, and access management, insecure interfaces and application programming interfaces like APIs, system vulnerabilities, and, the data lost, also insufficient due diligence. So a lot of these challenges lead to potential solutions, and they're solutions that come from different ways. But that's a good start. I like that question. Good question. Do you agree with that? Would you agree with those questions, or do you see something else?
No, I agree. I have a great fear of APIs in the cloud, and it's somebody asked me the other day, what does that even mean? And I was like, that's the scary part. But I agree with you. I think that all those things are are challenges that are out there. So if you're out there watching, those are things you can start sort of putting in your backpack of places to be and problems to solve, so that you can be rich and famous and donate money to me or something like that. I can start a GoFundMe for my clothes or whatever. That would be. We can improve things. We can make it better. Russ can stock his office with cool stuff. Well, let me ask you this then. So if I was a professional right now and I was trying to get into cybersecurity, because I get this question a lot from people that are in other areas or they're in peripheral areas and they're kind of playing around it, and they want to get into cybersecurity. Well, I mean, what do you think I ought to be doing? I mean, what should I do to get there?
Sure. So before I answer that, I think I'd like to answer what's my involvement and how does education and training kind of solves one piece of the puzzle to solve some of those challenges, and a lot of that starts with there could be several components of solving those challenges, right? But one of the solution that I think in solving those challenges for the CISOs or for IT executives is really helping create a learning culture. And then when you create that learning culture, it impacts the behavior of the people. And then how do you impact the behavior of the people is increase the engagement level, and in addition to increasing the competency levels, and subsequently it impacts the challenges and goals of the information security executives. So that's the connection I wanted to make.
Okay.
So your question was if you were a professional right now and wanted to get started in cybersecurity, what kind of things you should be doing? Okay. So so you need to start with. I would recommend that you start with an IT infrastructure and help desk roles. There's a kind of a common denominator roles, and then that could lead into various career mobility within the information security space. If you already have played a system admin role and understand hardware and operating systems, then you're ready to start thinking about developing skills in the cybersecurity. But that should provide you some sort of a platform.
Well, do you, in that regard, then, do you think that you really need to take certification and training? And even if you haven't got a lot of work experience, because there's this big debate, and I get it a lot, and I hear a lot of people talking about it, that you'll certainly hear people say, well, certification's worthless. And you'll hear people say, oh, you just get training and don't go to school or whatever. But you also hear people say, well, how do I get in the door? Because every job says I need this certificate or that certificate, or I need this and that. So do you think that even if you're just like a high school student or a college student or a professional even that's out there working some other, like a police officer or whatever, do you think certification or training is a good thing to pursue, but even before you don't have any work experience?
I would say yes. So one thing you could do is you should be follow if there's an interest in cybersecurity career, you should be in a career in cybersecurity. You should be follow certain publications that are out there. Get your pulse on the finger. Get your fingers on the pulse of global IT security events and trends to identify very specific focus areas that probably ties into the industry that you're in, the domain that you're in, or your pre-existing knowledge base that you have, and based on that'll allow you to get a feel for which areas that you need to get trained on. Now, if you're a high school student or college student, it'll get you oriented with the challenges and at a high challenges and high-level solutions. So by understanding these, you can start doing some hands-on work to get practice. This will enable you to land a job, but again, you will benefit from them if you already have decent understanding of the system administration. If you don't, start from there.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I'm a fan, and I've always argued with the people who say, well, certificates are worthless, because I'm like, well, if you're just trying to get started and you want to prove to somebody you know something, yeah, certificates not going to replace 20 years of experience as a programmer. But at the same time, if you're just trying to get a baseline skill set, it's a way to start getting those skills. And of course, practical experiences. There's never any substitute for that. But
well, it solves also two things, right? So it gives you immediate credibility that you met that minimum threshold
right.
in that subject matter area. And then if the objective for the certs or the certification is to potentially get a job or to make yourself marketable, so the potential employer or the interviewer just knows that, hey, you at least meet that. You meet those requirements that it's required, that is mapped to the roles and responsibility.
Yeah. Russ, you had something.
Yeah, Ed, in addition to the education component, the training component, the certification component, would you recommend to our listeners or viewers that another sort of ancillary but necessary portion of this to develop yourself in the field is to join local and online user groups and communities for the domain or area of interest that you are experiencing and exploring? Or do you find those groups, whether online or local, are not oftentimes worth checking out?
I think those you got to get I think getting into various communities, let's say cybersecurity communities, for example, various publications, and getting your fingers on the pulse. I think it's very, very imperative to get a feel for the industry.
Have you got a couple of recommendations then for everyone that I mean, like if I am like that and I want to put my fingers on the pulse of the industry, what would you recommend?
Well, so cybersecurity is like also an ocean, right? There's a lot of so for example, there's a lot of titles like even within the cybersecurity industry, there's tons of titles. So based on the roles and the titles that you have within the industry, almost each of those, or even they have various LinkedIn groups that you can go to. LinkedIn would be a great way to start.
Yeah.
Just create a profile, and there's probably 30 to 40 different groups. And then you just follow the thread of the discussions that are happening to get a good idea. And a ZDNet, some of the publications, there's a really, really good sources.
Yeah. And you can certainly watch podcasts.
You can do that too, yeah.
I mean, all kidding aside, but I mean, one good thing about watching podcasts like Security Weekly or whatever is that you do see a lot of people and who's in the industry and who those people are, and you'll hear about different titles and things like that. I agree. It's a confusing industry right now because I think it's a little early in terms of its lifespan. So there's a lot of shakeout going on and different roles. And so this company calls you this and this company calls you that. Hey, my first job, I was called a check processor. I was a mainframe operator, but my title was check processor 2. And I don't know why the 2 was there, but they made me say it. So it was like check processor 2. So Ed, what was your first job title? Have you got one for us?
I had it's fortunate and unfortunate both that I've never had a job. So that's a bad thing. So I've always been an entrepreneur. So
well, that's a title.
I did my own business even when I was in college.
Could you be entrepreneur
pros
too?
And cons to both.
You can be entrepreneur too. Russ, what about you? You got a first job title for us?
Yeah, it was PC Tech 1.
There you go. If only you'd aspired to be PT Tech 2, you could have got there. I was mortuary assistant one time, so I did have that one. That meant I got to hose the bodies down when they it was like it was an easy job, and the customers. I was one of the only jobs I ever had where I didn't get any complaints filed about me. So. It was just like, although I did. There were complaints filed about me. They were like, he had a bad attitude. I'm like, I was carrying your uncle out of your house. Come on. But okay, well, let me ask you this before we get completely off the rails. One other thing I do is I want to ask you is do you think certs are overrated? I know you kind of said no, you don't, but a lot of people, like you'll hear in the culture of this field is certs are overrated, blah blah blah. Although I notice usually the people saying that have some, but I mean, what do you think about that?
It depends which certifications are you considering. The value of certification is drive through its market validation for career growth, right?
Yeah.
As well as corporate recognition. So, for example, a risk management framework certification that is, that is DoD accepted is automatically validated as a global scale due to the DoD's rigorous standards of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not overrated. So there's been discussions around. I actually wrote a blog some time ago about jailbreaking degrees. So it all depends what your objective is, right?
Okay, wait. Okay, now you have to explain what that means, because you just said words that we all like. So jailbreaking degrees. I'm like, okay, so how do we jailbreak a degree?
Well, most of there's a phenomenon, or there's a debate about, do you really need degrees in college education to get a job, and what is the ROI for that, right?
Yeah.
So, and is there, so do you spend $80,000 or $100,000 and then you land a $90,000 job, versus you can get few certifications that will cost, a couple of certifications that will cost you maybe 10 grand, if that, right?
Yeah.
In some cases, and then you can land a $90,000 to $116,000 job. So ROI is a very critical component. So
I agree. I think that's complicated, though, because I think you might have read my slides, but I had some things about that, because we get that discussion a lot at the university or whatever about. I get asked that question every time there's an open house by parents, and they say, is this worth it? And for me, it's an easy answer, because I can say, well, you are going to spend this money, but at the end of it, you're going to make X dollars. But I do get asked a lot of times by high school students and things, why shouldn't I just go get a cert and go make $50,000 a year? When you make $11 an hour as a high school student, that sounds pretty tempting. So yeah. I agree with you. Russ, I know you have a comment.
I absolutely agree too. And since I'm advising a lot of the freshmen and sophomores, that's one of the things that is critical. I also advise or did in a former role non-traditional students. So these are students who are more adult or established in their fields. They're working in the position, have military experience, and so they're the ones that are seeking the more immediate payback. They're looking for promotion, or they're looking for advancement in their field and in the industry. And so those are the people that want sort of the more, I need to do this within 10 months. And so, they may not have time for four years.
Ed, do you think that's part of the culture of SEC? Because I know that there's a kind of clash of worlds going on now in cybersecurity, because the original cybersecurity was the sort of hacking culture. So the sort of DEF CON, soldering irons, and I don't need no education, I'm a good programmer kind of model. And then for a long time that persisted, and a lot of us kind of came out of that realm. And then right now it's getting merged into corporate ideology, which is like, you must have a college degree, son. What's wrong with you, boy? And then also like military, police, and all these groups have gotten involved in it. So there's a lot of different cultural attitudes, I think, going on about what you need to be to work in this field. Because there was a time, I don't know, say like 1995, when what you needed to be was the person who broke into, X. Then it turned into now, well, there's this whole other side of it, the corporate culture side, which is saying, well, you need this degree and you need that certification and you need to wear a coat and tie. And it's really interesting kind of cultural time in this field, I think.
So, well, what from a cultural perspective, from a corporate culture perspective. So let's say you're a cybersecurity professional, and then now you are in a working environment. So I believe that cybersecurity, again, we talked about some of the challenges in the industry, right? Mm-hmm. So these cybersecurity, all of these challenges, and I also said that one of the things that helps you address some of those challenges is cybersecurity training. How do you convert training into a learning experience? How do you turn training into a behavioral change? So unless there's a behavior change, you will not be able to get your people to make a difference or address some of those challenges, right? So when it comes to building an organization, cybersecurity, resilience, culture factors are important than technical factors or technical competencies, or even strong technical infrastructure. So does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, but you're saying so training is just the beginning of how you transition yourself into this space. I mean, because I always tell people it's a lifestyle. So, I mean, the fact that you work in this field means you have these kind of things and you have a lot of them and you like to play with them and you like to figure out how they work. And there's a kind of attitude, I guess, that goes along with the industry. I don't know, Russ, what do you think about that?
No, I definitely think it's more of a lifestyle, like you talked about. Joining these communities, like these podcasts for SDL, coupled with the education and the training and the certification. I definitely think it's more of a lifestyle.
Okay, well let's go back to this training and education thing, Ed, because you brought that up, and that obviously piques our interest. I get this a lot. So there are people at the university who say the university should be about education. And everybody has their own definition of that. There are people at the university who say training should not be done here, that this is where you should learn to speak French and read the Greek classics. There are people that say you should have some of both, and there are people who say this should be a professional organization. So, and just to give you an example, and I'm not advocating any of it. I can argue every one of those things. If I take my program and I just gel it down to the bare minimum and I say I'm going to teach you to program, I'm going to teach you to do networking, I'm going to teach you cybersecurity techniques, that's training. But if I add to that a whole bunch of other stuff, that's where the cost comes in. So, there's this kind of weird problem with that. And I think that's a cultural battle in education. But so do you think that training and education are different things?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my opinion, training is all about honing on skills and skills development, right? Competency development, which ties to productivity, competencies, and various skills, and that's where training. So education in our environment, we usually refer to either it's K through. It's more holistic, right? It's more holistic. It's more diverse. It's not any one skill, so which we refer to as, let's say, K through 12 education, and then or higher education. So there's more commonalities between K through 12 education or higher education or college education, and then training is a little bit different. But what's really important is how do you convert education or training both into a high impact learning experience. Mm-hmm. That's the most important thing. How do you, from my perspective, so training is, delivering a very specific content or specific curriculum for a very specific skill. Education is very holistic, very broad in nature, right? But then still, how do you help people convert in education into a high impact learning experience?
I want to know,
how do you monetize? If there's a monetization component, how do you monetize on that as well?
Well, there's always a monetization component.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody's got to pay the bills, right? Ultimately, if you go to I know there's always people that are dedicated, but if you go to the school and you say, we're not going to pay anybody anymore, but you'll still be teaching, right? There won't be anybody there. So, and we have to pay all those bills. So that's why the cost of education went up. I think there's a distinct difference in training and education, but I think you can mesh them together somehow to try to maximize both, because I need a trained employee. I'm really happy when my employees have read Melville and they can speak French, but I also need them to be able to manage the firewall. And so there's kind of a trade-off there between how much of each one do you get to put into that equation. Russ, I know you have a comment on this, because how could you not?
Well, I mean, given that we work at a liberal arts institution, and I have a liberal arts supplemental background, with my studies in posthumanism. I mean, I think that liberal arts or areas of study that aren't necessarily related to cybersecurity could help put people into a mindset where they could apply the principles and competencies that Ed was talking about into a not maybe more or less non-traditional approach, depending on what they do. So, I mean, I can't help but think that there is some level of positivity associated with the combination of education.
I do too. I mean, to me, it's like if you know all these like problem-solving techniques, like taking logic, and if you know how to solve problems, learning syntax is just learning syntax, and so you're going to get a better firewall operative out of somebody who can solve problems and think and argue and do all these things than you will out of somebody who just went and took a cert class. I assure you. But there's always a trade-off in cost. I mean, education's expensive, and it gets more expensive all the time. So, But how do you do high impact? Is that a thing? I mean, is there something we need to be doing, like when we do class?
Yeah, so how do you convert training into a high impact high impact learning experience? So this is now you open up a different very I can talk about that for hours. So it's people, the way people learn is very differently. How education or training is being delivered, how it's being consumed, how it's retained, how it's implemented, has changed over the years, right? And so now, then it was because the learner behavior is changing, people's attention span's changing, and how they consume content and is changing. If you look at kids in middle school, I mean, they're taking tests now through an iPad or a system. They're consuming information through a computer. So now, in order to do that, you gotta address the modality and the delivery engines, right? So you have to personalize the learning experience. You have to customize the learning experience for the audience, depending on their education level, their competency level, their age, the type of content that you're delivering. So, some people, for example, I'll give you an example. Some people learn better by doing. Some people learn better by listening. Some people learn better through multi-device. And some people their preferences of timings and days are different. Some people prefer online, self-paced. Some people prefer through mentoring. So, I mean, all of these things, some people prefer learning through researching. Some people prefer learning through writing a book and doing a summary. Some people even learn even better just by writing things down versus typing. Those are all different methods of learning. So how do you create a delivery mechanism in which it personalizes and customizes a learning experience to create a high impact learning experience?
I had a high impact learning experience. I'm not even making this up. When I learned to type, I took this typing class, right? I was actually on a typewriter. And the woman that taught it, I won't say her name here, but the way that she kept you from looking at your hands, because you're not supposed to look at your hands, she would creep around behind you, and she had this big wooden ruler thing that was like this long, and she would creep up behind you and go whack, and she would hit you like across the back of your hands, and you would have these like horrible bruises. But I don't look at my hands. In fact, when I find myself looking down, I immediately cringe. So it's that negative reinforcement. We're going to start implementing that, by the way. Russ and I have discussed this, the negative reinforcement method. But I mean, again, so I agree with you, Ed. Learning engagement is definitely something that I think is a problem to me in class these days, because I see the very things you're talking about all the time. And I mean, I started teaching people when it was like, stand in front of the room of 1,000 people and, oh, well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. White. And today, I don't see that as working the way it used to work, because people have many distractions. I see my own attention span has become reduced by just all the things. In fact, what was I saying? Something, but I mean, so what do you think? How do I improve engagement? I mean, I want my students to want to learn this stuff, and I want them to be excited about it, because I love to do the security stuff. But what should we do?
So 48% of the people learn at the point of need. So they want to learn when they need something. So some people prefer I think first and foremost you got to do is you create the why. You need to. I mean, if you're in a corporate environment, then you need to create the why factor. Why do people need to learn? And you create a culture of learning. And so once you understand the why part, that makes it a lot easier. It increases engagement. If you can even put some sort of a purpose behind it, this is the purpose that we're trying to do. This is what we're trying to achieve. At an individual level, they need to have a purpose as to why they need to learn. The objective is to create a job, or is it career mobility, so on and so forth, or is it increase income? So those two, once those two whys are taken care of, now let's peel the onion a little bit and let's just go one level deep. Then when it comes to the curriculum and then the training or the education or whatever, when it's delivered, it has to be delivered based on your audience. Who is the audience? So, some people prefer learning through mentors, and some people, prefer learning through collaborative learning through their peers. Some people prefer just learning in a very structured, formal setting, where you go through a 4-hour session or a 4-day session to learn, let's say, CompTIA or something, or DNA. So there's formal learning. There's another interesting thing called informal learning, and that is increasing at an accelerated rate. So based on the studies that we've done, 65% of the learning is happening through very structured learning settings where you are in a class, and 35% is just informal by reading blogs or studies and watching videos at different times. So if you can create a platform, if you could create an ecosystem, or if you can create a delivery engine that appeals to different rules of a learner, that's when you're going to get a very high impact learning experience. So, and that's kind of nirvana, but that's.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've been doing it. That's how I learn things typically, because I don't have the money to go take boot camp. I love to go take boot camps all the time. It's just fun, you learn something new. But I can't afford to shell out $5,000 every week to go to a boot camp, and I can't afford to just stay enrolled in college for the rest of my life, even though I wish I could, because that would be really fun. But I mean, I tend to learn things by when I need to know them. So I really 100% agree with that, because I sit down and say I need to teach Python. I mean, the first time I ever taught Python, I didn't know Python. So I just sat down and started coding it, and I knew how to code, so I just looked things up, and I had a book, and I looked up stuff online, and I looked for examples, and I just had to translate that. So I tend to learn things when I need to learn them. I learn for consulting jobs. Somebody calls me, and one thing a consultant will always tell you, hey, I think it was Pete Townsend one time was saying, somebody said, do you know how to play this? And he said, no, but come back tomorrow and you can bet we will. And that's, as a consultant, I've always been like that. So people call and go, do you know how to set up AS400? And it's like, no, but I'll figure it out tomorrow. So I agree with you on that. Russ, I bet you probably have, this is really like Russ's specialty in post-humanism and education.
Well, that model of learning is known as, in the field of education, is known as just-in-time learning. That's when there's a need created by a specific immediate benefit or upward mobility. So that just-in-time learning, I think Ed had mentioned 48% of it was this type of learning where people needed to learn right now, and therefore they're highly motivated, highly engaged, because it's high-stakes learning. So yeah, I completely agree that whole just-in-time thing.
It's like that. What's that burning sensation, right?
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Right. Well, that's about all the time we have, Ed. I think we could talk to you probably for the rest of the day about this, because I think you and Russ could probably talk about it for the next week and teach a class on it starting on Monday. I really want to thank Ed for joining us from Quickstart Learning, because he's the expert. Russ is also an expert in this area. Me, not so much. I'm an expert on Rick and Morty. But whatever. So thanks, Ed. Do you have any other comments?
No. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad I could contribute.
Yeah, anytime. We hope we'll have you back sometime and we can talk some more. Russ, thanks for joining us, and thank you for watching Secure Digital Life this week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.